Hey everybody, today I will be reading On the Meaning of Work by Mitchell Lerner. Enjoy. There's a story told about a young man who brings the ruler of a peaceful kingdom a secret method of making bread without labor. At first, everyone, ruler included, is delighted because it seems that hunger will be gone and the need to work will vanish. Then, painfully, reality sets in. What will people do with time on their hands? The king orders the young man killed. The devil, as the saying goes, makes work for idle hands. As the king belatedly understands, work is a necessity, an inescapable part of the human condition. No civilization can survive without work. But what is the nature of this activity that, by necessity, is part of your life and mine? This essay presents several interpretations of work from ancient to modern times. One of the earliest interpretations goes back to the Judeo-Christian roots of Western civilization, to the first story in Genesis. Eve, having eaten from the fruit, persuades Adam to do the same, and together they are banished from paradise to a life of toil and sweat of the brow. This kind of work means drudgery, repetition, punishment, and suffering. Accursed be the soil because of you. With suffering shall you get your food from it, every day of your life. It shall yield ye thorns and thistles, and you shall eat wild plants. With sweat on your face shall you eat your bread, until you return to the soil, as you were taken from it, for dust you are, and dust you shall return. In this fundamental Judeo-Christian understanding of work, humankind did not deserve the gift of paradise, the gift of a complete world. We got instead an incomplete world, filled with necessity and condition. To survive, we must work. It is not a very pleasant role we have to play, since according to this view, work is a punishment. At face value, this interpretation of work as punishment is intolerable. Every religion has a work ethic because few can imagine work without some reward. We view work as a mixed blessing, something people love to hate, but can't see doing without. Therefore, we redefine work in both religious and secular philosophies so that work offers something positive, so this early view gets modified. Rational moral thought does just that. It holds that our expulsion from paradise and the subsequent necessity of work has a reason: to develop moral character. We attain certain values to work. Work keeps us out of trouble. It reduces the wastefulness of idleness. Work challenges us to use our talents and abilities, and helps develop personality. It is said to reduce self-centeredness and arrogance, moderating the excessive lifestyle in favor of a modest one. Work separates the authentic from the image. Think of two bike riders on the street. Same racing gear, same bikes, same clothes. You cannot tell one from the other. Only in the race is the true racer distinguished from the hopeful novice. Without exception, the real thing, not the appearance, shows through work. So, in rational moral thought, the fall from paradise becomes advantageous since work fosters positive qualities in us: generosity, because by working we give; faith and goodwill, because we hope without knowing that the fruit of our labors will be good. In fact, work mirrors our human condition. We strive in the face of the unknowable. We seek means to great ends. We are forever impatient with the peace of our progress. Ultimately, work is a supreme test for all of us. Through work, we succeed or fail, become great or small, are judged to be worthy or petty, good or bad, high or low. The trouble is, though, that this profound and ennobling view of work doesn't fit easily into our modern experience, so we must look further. This brings us to our next interpretation. Hannah Arendt, the influential modern philosopher, wrote much about the meaning of work in her book, The Human Condition. She suggested that our understanding of work goes back as far as the ancient Greeks. Greek culture distinguished between craftsmen, those who made things, and laborers, those who worked with their bodies. In ancient Greek society, slaves and women labored, performing menial tasks. Laboring was, in Aristotle's description, the meanest because the body is most deteriorated. Aaron points out that this distinction between work and labor exists in many languages. In French, it is the travailler and ouvrier, and in German, it is the arbeiten and worken. The German word Arbeit originally referred to farm laborers. In English, the word labor connotes a sense of drudgery and suffering as found in the biblical story of man's fall, while the word work connotes effort that is directed toward the accomplishment of making something. So we get phrases like the works of Shakespeare, Beethoven, and the Beatles, and by contrast, the labors of Hercules that involved back-breaking physical tasks. This distinction between work and labor helps us to think about what we will be doing the rest of our lives. Will we be laboring, which suggests a kind of slavery? Or working, which suggests a more meaningful connection to the activity and the possibility of producing something? For the most part, we share with the ancient Greeks the feeling that physical labor is a menial occupation holding little status in society because labor leaves little trace behind. So, working is making something that stays. For us and our friends in ancient Greece, where modern civilization was born, work holds status because it means leaving a trace of your existence, a body of work. On the other hand, laborers who make neither a complete thing nor leave any notable contribution to humankind are relegated to the periphery of society. In the last century, laborers sought to correct this flaw in the scheme of things by organizing into collective political units. As a result of the labor movement, the status of laborers was raised both intellectually and socially. This was something that the ancient Greeks never accomplished. For the ancient Greeks, the highest form of work allowed for as much leisure time as possible for the pursuit of philosophy and virtue. In our day, the laborer is equally entitled to leisure, protection, dignity, and an OHIP number, while the philosophers and some craftsmen are often relegated to the unemployment lines. Wisdom is best pursued when food, shelter, and other basic human needs are met, even though, according to some, we gain much wisdom from scrambling to meet our basic needs of survival. In ancient Greece, where the pursuit of wisdom became an ideal, only 20% of the eligible population could participate in politics, philosophy, and pure thought, while 80% had to work. Our next interpretation of work demonstrates that wisdom derives not from the luxury of philosophy, but from the experience of the common laborer. Karl Marx, the 19th century socialist philosopher, had much to say about this question. Marx believed that industrialization turned labor into a product to be bought and sold in the marketplace. He called it labor power, and every individual had about the same share. As the factories of the Industrial Revolution churned out more and more product, more and more labor was required. People abandoned land because increased agricultural efficiency freed them to move to cities where a better life was possible. People moved from being generalists, capable of many things, to being specialists, capable of one or a few things only. When people sell their labor, they are exchanging an essential part of themselves for money. And this process of trading labor for a wage leads to measuring self by the wage, not by ability. Even people who define themselves as workers rather than laborers are not immune. On the industrial assembly line, in the steel or textile mills, in many human spheres, work became increasingly subdivided into limited operations performed by separate workers. While this maximized productivity, it minimized craftsmanship. Workers became increasingly adept at repetitive tasks as the various aspects of the work became disconnected. When work is divided into component parts, we call this the division of labor. The individual worker finds it increasingly difficult to improve through work. He or she, therefore, seeks self-improvement elsewhere. Aware of a growing split between public and private roles, the worker may attempt to integrate the two with some success. However, the division of labor ultimately requires a division of self, and the modern struggle becomes one of compromising one's identity. For example, a doctor's social identity is distinct from his or her private self, which is found at home. The patients know nothing of that doctor's private life. The sphere of work is geographically and socially separate from the private sphere where the real person is known. So, fragmenting the production of a thing into isolated tasks has consequences beyond the workplace. The worker in a sweater factory who only sews labels day in and day out may feel detached from the product, from the manufacturing process, and from himself as an individual capable of more than repetitive tasks. This detachment is called alienation, and it is not restricted to the assembly line, but is a social fact found in middle-class occupations as well. We have assembly line education, medicine, and law, where teachers, doctors, and lawyers are so specialized that they are attached to small parts of the overall process. Marx wrote his ideas in the 1800s when working conditions were absolutely intolerable, when owners of mines would hire children because they were small enough to dig coal in the smallest seams, and workers died early in life from breathing metal dust in cutlery factories. His ideas have never gone away. The long, sweaty hours in unhealthy conditions that characterize the working environment of the past can still be found in developing countries. Work remains a constant, but the kinds of work change with the times. Today, we need to be seduced to work by an illusory guarantee of security, fulfillment, and advancement. The promise of making it is deceptive because it doesn't remove the necessity for having to work, but only sweetens it. Winning the lottery doesn't mean you no longer have to work. Making it refers to having it all now. And even though it is a culturally esteemed value, it is not the same goal as making something. It is ironic, but people who focus on making something often end up having really made it. Today, many occupations seem to offer more freedom from having to labor to meet our basic daily needs. Machines take the place of manual labor. Motors replace the strain of lifting and pulling. Workers operate and monitor machines that do everything from cutting metal and stitching leather. In an explosion of technological change, photography, television, radio, telephones, nuclear power, rubber and plastics, medicine and computers redefine lifestyle at a pace never before experienced, leaving little time to reflect and plan. Alienation is still a reality in the modern world, and along with it comes the challenge of finding meaning in work. Finally, whether work implies suffering and drudgery, or leaving a trace of your existence, or if work means alienation, the work you choose is probably the most important decision you will make. There is something irrevocable about that choice. Your lifestyle gradually envelops and defines you, and you become whatever occupation you have chosen. Technician, accountant, housewife, teacher, nurse, farmer, truck driver, writer. The work we do folds us into various known and unknown quantities, measurable players in the game of life. It is inevitable, even if we remain idle, we are defined. To many of us, ultimately, work means maturity. It helps us identify and accept ourselves, to teach us our limits and possibilities on the testing ground. It is not enough to be a good person or a promising individual. Work, in the final analysis, defines a person clearly and mercilessly for all the world to see. As the humanists say, we have some control over the circumstances of our lives. We have some choice of occupation, of deed. In the end, our lives are measured by what we accomplish and leave to memory. We all strive, secretly and openly, to make a difference, to make our existence worthwhile for others to benefit from. So the challenge laid down to Adam and Eve, to the ancient Greeks and to us is the same: to make something of value when nothing of value is possible without engaging the human condition, without modifying the world. That work is the ultimate pain and pleasure of life, both necessary and desirable.